We started talking about this last year, well before COVID occurred. But New Zealand's been on a journey for some time to move from volume to value to values-based marketing, and as a destination, having people come here because they share the same values identity that we do. And I think that that's something that people are going to continue to want to have exposure to. But I also think that post-COVID, that desire to have a values-based experience. So how do I identify with you as a person and what you stand for, and how does that change how I see the world? And I do think New Zealand has a really unique opportunity ahead of itself with regards to that.
Now, we saw supply chains compromised during the lockdown, and they continue to be compromised. How will that impact on tourism?
Well, the big impact that obviously we've seen is our borders are closed. So from a supply chain perspective, if there is no border to cross, there aren't any visitors. And without visitor flow, we have no income. We have no revenue being generated for the economy. And one of the benefits of tourism, and many countries around the world have taken advantage of this, is every time a visitor turns up somewhere and swipes their EFTPOS card or their credit card, that's instant foreign exchange in your economy. It's growing the pie. It makes our economy bigger and healthier. But of course, with the door shut, that's not happening. So the supply of tourists is ground to a halt.
Now, you seem energised and excited already, so what motivates that? What gives you this level of enthusiasm?
Well, I mean, I think probably like perhaps stages of grief that we move through when we go through an experience like COVID. We've gone from having an industry, international industry, or a tourism industry, in fact, even domestically, delivering some $3.5 billion a month into the New Zealand economy, and it hit zero. And I think along with that, we saw the closure of some very prominent tourism businesses. Some, of course, have hibernated, i.e. they'll return when the volumes pick up. But we've also got a number of businesses who have actually unfortunately closed completely. And of course, we're starting to see a wave of redundancies and the wave of closure of businesses throughout tourism and hospitality and associated sectors. That's going to continue for quite a while. So during that first period, of course, there's quite a lot of anger and maybe and a lot of frustration and sadness is what we're seeing as an entire industry crumble. But through all this, there are some green shoots. And we're starting to also see, and I'm having conversations with people about what are they going to do now. We've got domestic operating at level 2, it'll grow further at level 1. There are things like Trans-Tasman bubbles in conversation, and what that could do in terms of the flow of visitors, but also not just tourism, but education and others across the border. Then I think there's the way in which New Zealand and New Zealanders have handled the COVID crisis. And I do think that gives us hope, not just in terms of tourism, but also in terms of our supply of food and beverages and how that could be utilised in the world stage. The industry is very scalable, it's very flexible, and although there will be job losses and there will be businesses that fail, there will be some that don't, and there will be new jobs created and there will be new businesses that will emerge from it. So I think this is a reset for the sector rather than a complete, disintegration.
Let's look at the jewel in the crown, Queenstown. What can the industry learn from what happened and continues to unfold in Queenstown?
I think Queenstown has a couple of different components to it, and prior to COVID-19, of course, there was this rising concern in New Zealand around the volume of tourism and tourists at certain locations, particularly hotspots like Queenstown and Rotorua to a lesser extent. But they were feeling pressure, local communities were certainly feeling pressure. That is definitely a lack of infrastructure investment, not necessarily an oversupply of tourists, right? So I think the two things to consider on somewhere like Queenstown is how does it redesign itself coming out of COVID to say, could we set ourselves up differently? Could we have a better model for engaging with communities? Could we have a better design footprint for infrastructure services that better meet the needs of our community, but also help service our international or domestic visitor? And I do wonder if the opportunity for us is to look at somewhere like Queenstown and go, okay, the underlying natural assets that make it such a beautiful place to visit haven't disappeared. The international visitors and domestic to some extent have disappeared. And along with it, a bunch of businesses would have also closed, but it will rebuild. But if it's going to rebuild, let's do it in a way that's going to, if you like, resolve for some of the issues that were there from the past. Now is a great opportunity to rethink our infrastructure design. It's a great opportunity to bring in the voice of iwi, the voice of community, as well as the voice of the industry to make sure we're designed for the future in a way that overcomes some of those challenges we were starting to see in the past. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the visitor, it's also about us. This is our home, this is where we live. And we want to make sure that when we open our country up for others to come and join and visit, that we benefit too. It's not just about them, it's about us. And I think together we have a very unique experience, and I think we have to ensure that we keep it that way by investing in what really matters to us.